In life, we will meet resistance, which can leave us feeling worn down and worn out. But we can find a reason to keep going. Show up, push through, and never give up.
Hey everybody! I'm glad you're here today as we wrap up our latest series called Never Give Up. The past few times we've met, we've been talking about resilience. And we said that resilience is our ability to bounce back and grow stronger after we've struggled, failed, or faced hard stuff in our life. You see, every single person in this room either has or is or will experience some sort of big setback in life. Big or small, challenges are going to come at all of us. The kind of challenges that threaten to knock us down and leave us wanting to give up. But that's exactly where resilience comes in. It helps us find the strength to get up, to keep going, and to never give up. And it allows us to stay in the game. And I don't know about you, but for me, resilience is definitely something I need more of in my life because I've found myself in many situations where I've just wanted to give up and to give in. When I was in college, I had to take trigonometry. Now, for some of you, you may have taken trig in high school already, and if you have, that's amazing. Anyway, I do pretty good in math, but when I got to trig, I felt lost. Trig has lots of words and concepts that aren't really found anywhere outside of trigonometry, and the teacher started off teaching as though we understood what those words meant. Well, long story short, the first test came around and I got a 45. Like out of 100, a 45. And I started second guessing myself. Maybe math isn't for me. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. But you know what? I kept going to class and I started to get it little by little. And I also started finding out that others in the class had the same struggles as me. And when it was all over, I ended up with a C in the class. And to be honest, I was just glad to get out of there. The point is, though, that I had a choice to quit or to be resilient. And I chose to persevere and I made it through. Now, maybe you can relate. Your story may not sound like mine. Your challenges may look different. But if there's one thing I think we all know, it's the feeling of wanting to give up, to give in, and to stop trying in the face of really hard things. When you keep failing that subject or you get cut from the team, no matter how hard you try, when you can't seem to shake that constant anxiety that you carry with you, when your best friend leaves you for a new friend group, when your parents get divorced, those are the things that make us want to stop showing up and to start giving up. And honestly, I understand why. We receive messages from our culture all the time that tell us to believe that our best lives should be easy lives. And in a lot of ways, it can be true. So much of our life has become really easy. We can have pizza delivered in 30 minutes or less. We can get an answer to just about any question we have on Google in less than a second. We can have a meal ready from the microwave in just a couple of minutes. We can order that totally random prop from Amazon that we need for a class presentation, and we can have it show up at our house in 2 days. It's awesome. But there's a downside to it. Getting so used to convenience and speed and ease in every area makes the places where things aren't easy that much harder to get through. Because resilience is like a muscle. When we don't use it enough, it weakens. And so when something comes up that takes a lot of work or takes longer than we're used to, and we haven't had the practice to be resilient, it can feel impossible to take on. When we really have to study to pass every test in that one class, when we need to have a hard conversation with a friend, when we know it's time to break up with that person who isn't good for us, when we have to speak up about something that's difficult or painful, when we face any setback where progress feels slow, getting through it is hard and trying to face it feels like a lot of work. And in moments like those, it feels easier just to give up. And in a lot of ways, it is easier to give up, but here's why that's not a great idea. And I know you already know this. There are many things that happen in this life that aren't going to be easy. Every single relationship that really matters, whether with Jesus, your parents, your siblings, your friends, those will at some point be difficult. Any hobby or any activity that you want to be great at will at some point be challenging. And some of us are going through things personally right now that are so much more difficult than we think we can handle. A lot of difficult things are unavoidable, and we need to have built up the resilience muscle to be able to handle those difficulties when they come up. But more than that, as frustrating as hard and painful difficult times are, what if these difficulties were doing something in us and to us that we would otherwise miss if we weren't going through them? What if there was more to the story? Today, I want to look at a verse from the New Testament in the Bible that I think can help us when it comes to resilience and what having resilience in the face of difficulty can do for us. It's from a letter written by a guy who believed in and followed Jesus with his life, a guy named Paul. You see, Paul started out as this guy who was kind of the worst. He treated people pretty terribly, especially Christians. But then Paul encountered Jesus and his whole life changed. Just like that, the mission of his life changed, and now Paul was all about sharing the hope of Jesus with others. Because for Paul, that hope changed everything. But it wasn't easy. In fact, life for Paul was very challenging after that. Last week, we talked about how he was disliked, beaten, abandoned, persecuted, even put in prison. We're talking about some pretty major setbacks, and like any of us when we face setbacks, Paul had a choice: to give up or to be resilient. Paul chose resilience. He kept going, kept pushing, kept believing that he could come back from his setbacks. Not because they were easy to come back from and not because they weren't a big deal, but because Paul had a perspective about them that carried him through them. Listen to what he writes. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Romans 8:18. And then later, in a letter to the church in a city called Corinth, Paul writes something similar when he says this: For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. 2 Corinthians 4:17. Here's what Paul is not saying. Resilience is about getting over it. Resilience is about moving on. Resilience is about not making such a big deal about what we're facing. No, that's not what Paul is saying. Paul is saying we are suffering, we are experiencing troubles. Those things are real, but those things are doing something in us. Those things are working on us and through us, and who we become on the other side, this glory that will be revealed in us that Paul mentions, is better than any trouble that we face. But if we're honest, I think a lot of us would say that when it comes to difficult things, we aren't imagining who we will be on the other side. We're only thinking about what those things mean about who we are in the moment when it's feeling overwhelming. In fact, we're looking at ourselves in those moments through a totally different filter. Have you ever looked through a really good pair of sunglasses? You know, the polarized ones? Well, when the sunglasses have a polarized filter, they cut out all of the reflections and glare and let you see the world clearly. I like to use them when I'm fishing because you can actually see into the water and see the fish. And our minds work the same way. So often we get stuck looking at the glaring problems in front of us, but when we change the filter in our minds, we can look past the glare of our shortcomings and problems and see the prize that awaits us further ahead. Now, here's the thing. I'm not talking about just hyping yourself up with positive words. Sure, positive self-talk can be helpful in situations, but here I'm talking about more than that. I'm talking about choosing the filter that tells us what's true about who we are in God's eyes. I'm talking about choosing to see ourselves the way that God sees us, about choosing to believe that there is work God is doing in you, even in the middle of difficult times, and that there is a you on the other side of this that God is making you into. You know what I take all of this to mean? That you mean so much to God, and God has given you what you need to be resilient in the face of difficult situations. Not only that, God hasn't given up on you, but at this very moment, He's shaping the you that you can be on the other side of this. Now, for some of you, this may be all the encouragement you need to change your filter in the face of challenges. This may be the truth that you can hold on to when you find yourself standing in front of a setback. But for others, I know this is hard because the troubles and challenges and setbacks that you're dealing with seem never ending. You're barely able to stay in the fight against what you're facing. And if that's you, let me just say this. I am so sorry for what you're going through. I'm sorry that life seems harder than it should be. Even though bouncing back from what's holding you back feels impossible, trust me when I tell you it's not. The story that God is writing about you does not end with your difficulty. There is something that God is doing in you no matter how bad it feels right now and no matter how things turn out. Remember what Paul said. The suffering now won't compare to the eternal glory that we'll receive later. In other words, there is a you on the other side of this, a glory, and the suffering doesn't get the last word. That's a new filter that we can use to see the challenges in front of us. And here's the good news. You don't have to master that setback this second. It may take you time, but eventually it will become lighter. In some cases, you'll realize that what you thought would be a lifetime was really just a brief moment in your life. And the next time you face something like it, you'll do it knowing that you can be resilient. But in order to do that, you have to choose now to never give up on you. God won't give up on you, and we won't give up on you. So you can't give up on you either. Remember, never give up on you. The more you get up, show up, and choose not to give in the face of setbacks, the stronger and more resilient you'll become. So to help you consider how you can choose to never give up on you, let's go back to those questions that we want to ask ourselves to help us to grow more resilient. Number 1, what is happening? What are the setbacks you're facing right now? The challenges that are causing you to want to give up? What difficulties in life feel heavy? What do you feel like you just can't conquer? Sometimes simply naming the potential setbacks that we're standing in front of makes them lose a bit of their power. So, start by being honest and naming what's holding you back. Number 2, what is true no matter what? What filter can you change to see yourself or your setback in a different way? A way that reminds you of what's true first. Go back to that verse that we read earlier and think about what Paul said, that suffering isn't the end of the story, and start there. What do you need to do to remember that is true in what you're going through right now, and when you face trouble in the future? Number 3, what can you do? This is where resilience requires us to do something. So in the face of your troubles, what can you do to keep going? Maybe it's sharing with a friend that you trust about how you're struggling. Maybe it's talking to a mentor or a small group leader or a counselor for more guidance. Maybe it's memorizing scripture that encourages you or praying consistently for strength to get through it. Maybe it's knowing your limits and practicing some self-care, doing things like taking walks and journaling, listening to music, or taking a nap. Whatever you can identify to help you take a step towards staying in the fight and choosing resilience, give it a shot. Listen, I know setbacks feel heavy, and sometimes finding the strength to keep trying is hard, and that's where our small groups come in. Small groups are a great place to open up about what you're dealing with so that you can find support that you need to keep going. So, will you consider sharing with your group this week? Let them encourage you to never give up on you. And as you go, think about this question. What's one thing that you can do to remind yourself that who you are now is not who you will be on the other side? That God is working and doing something in you. As you think about that, remember God is doing something in you, so don't give up. Hope in you.